Thanks for coming. For me, it really feels like, we haven't met for 3 months or something. But I do want to get back to the tools, and I do want to get back to the question of what tool to use in a particular situation, okay? And as I believe that hold on, I'm just playing with my screen. Yeah, I believe that question raises a whole lot of issues. In a really, quite exciting way. I guess just to assume for a moment that we know the tools, we know the tools, we're familiar with them, and we've got this task, this dream, or this problem, and what tools are most going to help me pursue that dream, solve that problem, face that fear. And I think just in that process, we sort of clarify what we're looking at, and we clarify the tools we have, whether we know them or not, whether we're acceptable, whether they're acceptable to us. So I think there's a way that, I guess it's a bit like, if you've stated the problem, one of those sort of common sense cliches, which, by the way, I always like to bring into Pelham very deliberately, because I feel it creates a different humanity. To say a stitch in time saves 9, or take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I think that creates a different humanity than wrapping it up in words of professional language, professional abbreviations, which so often come in, or the Pelham tool for that matter. I think it just sort of, hey, we're all in this world together. And yeah, it's a bit like, as we've seen, it's a bit like a major political event and ceremony, and the person who is the center of that event all of a sudden is holding a baby. Pretty powerful. And bringing, I think it's something that our field of work has not always been concerned about bringing in the humanity. It's sort of not something you're taught in college or examined on, or I guess taught about. I think it's Mary.
Well, I just wanted to say more than that. I think what I notice that really disturbs me is like the opposite, that ordinary people like to fling around PTSD, dyslexia, I'm sure some people have dyslexia or ADHD, but I'm pretty certain that a lot of people who kind of claim it like a badge of honor don't have it. And that's the opposite of what we're talking about, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a large issue, and it's an issue around which I'd really want to bring back. We've only got a little bit of the whole truth. We don't have it all. But I think a little bit of the whole truth we do have is that we look for ways to bring humanity and very fundamental and basic humanity back into this field. We've done it, we do it. But I mean, I guess the reason I put it here, I want to find a way that with few rather than many words, I can sort of say, you know, we use common sense cliches, we like them. And then I guess I'm sort of rehearsing and even saying here, and the reason we do that, it brings a humanity into the work. That's a pretty good statement. Coming back to, you know, going through the process of finding a tool, selecting a tool, thinking about a tool, that's when I went off on that rift. That's where, you know, if you state the problem, it's half solved, just in the stating of it, and let alone shared. You know, problem shared is a problem halved. Now, I think, you know, looking at the tools, I think gives us a place, okay, I am struggling with this. Where am I going to be able to take it? And are there tools here that could be useful? And I think within that process, we give ourselves a bit of distance from being absorbed by whatever our concern is. So we're not right up against fear or anxiety, or on the other hand, we're not right up against this, all the emotions of this great new project I've got, and I know it's going to work. Okay, if we take that syndrome, quite a phrase, what would it be called? Overly enthusiastic and optimistic syndrome, right? OEOS. And, you know, that's one I am very prone to, as Mary and Nikki know. So if I go into the tool, okay, I'm looking at that. What tool is available? What tool could I use? What tool might be useful? And it's sort of almost immediately the pendulum. Are we okay with the tech, Mary? Your voice is gone.
I just said it's a little tech thing. Elizabeth's dealing with a little tech thing, but you're fine.
Okay. Hi, Elizabeth, if you're there. Yeah, so I think we've got something here that's a sort of basic process that we can get into at other times. But and my belief in this body of work is that you can do that. You can almost take any situation and find a tool that could really work. And I always parallel that statement is that I know this is not for everyone. You know, not everyone goes to the same church. Not everyone takes the same vacations. Not everyone likes the same music. So, you know, some people will like this and some people won't. So we're not sort of offering something that should appeal to everyone and will work for everyone. We're not saying that. But we do make the bold statement that, you know, you give me an issue and there will be Pelham tools that will be applicable to that. Yeah, Mary.
Well, I was just thinking about what you've just said and what you said about, you know, common sense, wisdom phrases, metaphors or whatever. Who else shares that with us? AA and Al-Anon. You know, first things first, one day at a time. What's the most important thing?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
all of
yeah.
those things, and nobody else does that. I don't think in a therapy way. Like
Yeah.
we have that. It just always blows my mind when I realize how much we have in common with the 12-step.
No, it does. It does me. And as someone who's just, you know, a bit of history, and I'll probably tell, anyway, I'll try and not digress too much today. I will a bit. You know, I didn't know AA as someone who needed AA, you know, and as I've said here, you know, my father was someone who, Australia in the 20s and 30s of the last century, and the Australian culture of those times. And he played a lot of sport. He played rugby, but he would not go to the pub. Now I sort of grew up with, I went through a stage, rite of passage in the Australia I grew up with, that, you know, going to the pub and getting drunk was a rite of passage. So I went through all that, but it never appealed to me much at all. And I guess that was because of memory links to my father. And I don't know why he had that position. You know, he didn't, I don't know where that came from in him, but it came from somewhere. And, you know, the story that was told, they'd say, come on, Jim, you know, it's Friday, come to the pub. And he would say, the missus won't let me. So, you know, that's sort of in my background. So when I came to AA, it was very much as an outsider, okay? It wasn't someone who was inside it and, you know, saw the value of it from that place. I mean, I went to a whole bunch of meetings, you know, within the last 7 or 8 years of my life. Before that, I'd probably been to 2, and they weren't AA meetings, they were GA meetings, Gamblers Anonymous. So when sort of AA came along, I developed my stuff. I learned more about AA. It was like ticking the boxes in terms of support. You know, they do that. Oh, that supports me. They do that. Oh, that supports me. They do that. Oh, that supports me. I mean, I had my concept and practice, not just concept, but practice of transparency, which is another tool we can look at in a minute. And, you know, what tools do you pick out? Way before I knew anything about AA. And I had it sort of supported by things like William James and Martin Buber and Carl Rogers. And of course, then when I knew AA, sometime later, you know, 20 or 30 years, it was literally like ticking boxes. You know, when I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, when I went to a bunch of AA meetings, and some of them, and a couple I smuggled into, it was a little bit of an in-joke, because people knew I wanted to know. And it was like ticking a box on. That supports Pell, and that supports Pell, and that supports Pell, and that supports. It was sort of quite amazing. So I have particular take on AA and Al-Anon from being quite outside it. And even when I went to meetings, I never, you know, I was a bit uncomfortable because I was an observer, okay? No, nobody minded and people knew me and stuff.
Peter, can I just say with
Yeah.
love that it feels a bit that you did go on a digression from what you were saying about choosing the tools.
Yeah, so let me come back to the tools. So, you know, the claim is you know, give me a problem, give me an issue, give me a dream, and I can tell you where the Pelham tools would fit that. And I will tell you where the Pelham tools would fit that, thanks, Mary, in a way that you will be able to grasp it. I don't know how much I've said it here, but it's a sort of concept in terms of the Pelham tools that I've been trying to develop probably over the last 7 or 8 months. And it comes off the same time as I developed the concept of the Pelham lift. You know, when the coronavirus first came in, you know, nobody's got time for a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm saying some of this you could grasp quickly, you know, like you can grasp a hammer and a chisel and, you know, do something with it and a piece of wood. It's not going to make you a carpenter. It's not going to make you a master carpenter. But you can still grasp the tool. And that was also around, and this is picking the tools, that was also around making the tools available to children and young people. So I guess, and I do feel that, I do feel that. You can almost take anything, and there's something about this that's relevant. And I'm not quite sure, you know, I met Vic today. I'm not quite sure, you know, what to say about David Pelham's mind, except it was extraordinary. Just extraordinary, because it had this width that I've not found elsewhere in my field. Yeah, I think it's in literature, I think it's in poetry. It's not in my field.
I mentioned a strata when I was talking to Cynthia and Elizabeth, and they said, oh, I forget which one it was. Oh, I said, that's right. I said to Cynthia, you're really high in perseverance strata, Cynthia. And she said, well, you know, what's that? So I briefly taught this. I mean, it's complicated, so I don't know how much I was able to convey in a brief teaching. You know, taught the 7 strata. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a little bit like if it was a cartoon, their eyes might have been a bit wide, you know, because it's like, oh, this whole box of tools in Pelham that I didn't know about before.
Yeah, no, that's true, because, you know, what's happened this week, and maybe we'll just get into it next time, strata, okay? Maybe we'll just say that. But, you know, it's all social strata. If you take the strata material and understand it, and what we call social strata, and, you know, this huge 74, 70, I mean, you know, millions. How do we understand the people on the other side? And that's social strata. That's what social strata is all about. And then, you know, social strata links to communication strata, because you've got to be able to get your message across, and your social strata's going to affect you. I know this is rushing ahead a little bit in terms of next week, but, you know, your social strata is going to affect your communication strata. Just one real simple example of that. If someone makes a little bit compulsively makes sexist jokes, not a super bad guy, but can't quite stop making sexual jokes, that affects almost all that. When you look at it deeply and technically, that will affect all that person's communication. So, and then memory links and how they pull together. So certainly we will do that here, and then however this joint decision, whatever we do in terms of this morphing into a more formal Pelham training course. Well, this will just be this will be a good prep school, okay? Everyone will be prepped here, And I think, and again, I think the process, when we get into Strata, it's, and I guess if you would tell him that, Mary, I do miss Vic today because, he sat in the same room as me and heard this guy talk. And what I call Strata, which is a very big part of Pelham training, probably weeks, months, and some of the most comprehensive, some of the most difficult. It goes on for weeks and weeks, understanding it and how it all works and fits together. My memory is, David Pelham threw that out in about half a lecture, okay? I sort of grabbed it and held on to it. But yeah, so, again, there's something about his mind. So trying to stick with the which tool. So when you're looking at politics, you're looking at social strata. But when you're looking at politics, which is that campaign, the same a theatre production is a theatrical production, a sporting event is the event, Wimbledon, where Nikki lives. There's going to be all sorts of pendulum swings in there. And you can almost see it, the people who can't handle the pendulum swings don't make it. And certainly the people who can't handle the pendulum swings and don't lack a sort of self-awareness that they cannot have a sense when they're making mistakes, because those three examples I gave, political campaign, fairly successfully long-running theatrical production, and a major sporting event, they will have highs in them. And if you can't hit the right high at the right time, you're not going to make it. You're going to be mediocre. I don't know what it's like to stand on centre court at Wimbledon and, place the volley that means you win the whole championship. But that's got to be some complicated pendulum swing. Because on the one hand, you've got to have that, you've got to be right up there. But then in another way, it's got to be control. Because if you miss that one, you got to let go of it. You got to come to the middle of the pendulum. You can't go into a big low because, you missed a volley that anyone could have played. You've got to sort of put aside. And in other language, that's what the great champions know. And the same thing is, an actor of, huge status, Judi Dench or Laurence Olivier when he was alive, night after night after night, they project all this incredible passion out there. So it's got to be a combination of almost extreme highs and a very disciplined middle of the pendulum. And of course, politics is visible. The memory links come in, and I'll be a bit careful, okay? But Joe Biden really reminds me of my dad, okay? Really does. My dad was a school teacher, a modest man, but my dad was a good man. There's some way that he really reminds me of my dad. And because I knew the whole thing was having this huge effect on me. And I thought, oh, that's some of it, okay? Yeah, because say, Hillary Clinton wouldn't have reminded me of either my mum or dad. But he really does remind me of my dad. Almost sort of a, yeah.
I just wanted to say that I found what you've been saying very interesting, but I kind of lost the context. I don't know why we're talking about the three, the politics, the theatrical performance, and the sporting event.
Because it's, yeah, okay. Thank you for bringing me back. And I'll just try and keep saying the phrase. It's picking the right tool, okay? Because in the situation of those three examples, politics, sport, theatre, there will be a very large performance life force, okay? A necessarily large performance life force. So picking that tool and understanding that within performance life force, there are pendulum swings that are much more intense, passionate, and necessary than there are on the other two life forces, okay? And that's where it can be so there are pendulum swings. So there is emotionality, self-centeredness, risk-taking, concerned with being applauded and admired, all the things that are in the performance life force. So performance life force and tool, okay, can really work there. If someone was coming from another place, say someone had a lot of caring life force and decided to go into politics or the theatre or sport almost. I mean, there's a phrase, a good sportsman, the aim is to compete, not to win. Those sort of statements that come out of the Olympic Games. That's fine if someone's got a huge amount of performance life force, so it's balanced a little bit. I have a little bit concerned with you and what it does for you that, I humiliated you on the tennis court, but you can't have very much. It'll do you in. You won't make it. I've seen people, London's one of the theatrical centers of the world. And I've known people who really wanted to go into the theater. They had all the talent. Nikki and I trained one or two of them. They got the openings. Yes, Cynthia.
Actually, I have a question because it came up and I wanted to know if this was a natural part of these life forces or is it just something with me? But like I've been noticing with all the pendulum swings this week that and it's almost instantaneously. If I'm in my material life force, I'm very calm. But the minute I start going into my caring life force, my pendulum starts going all over the place. Is that like a normal feature of those two?
Yeah, very much.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole thing where you can look at what sort of pendulum swings is someone likely to have as immaterial performance or caring. Because you're right, there aren't many pendulum swings. There aren't that many pendulum swings in material life force. However, if you really don't respect it at the wrong time, you're going to be in trouble because there'll be a huge pendulum swing.
And also, one thing that I've also noticed from my material life force is that when things look bad from the material life force, that gets really, that actually is more scary when you actually, because you can actually sort of see how bad things look in that case.
Yeah. In a way, what that is, you know, don't cross the mother bear's path if she's close to her cubs, right? Because she will kill you. David Pellin called the material life force hostility. Came up with it. He came at it from a different angle than I do. He came at almost all the life forces more from the angle of what is the hurt involved. I sort of switched that around a bit. But he was making a profound statement when what we call the material life force, he called the motivating force of hostility. So within that, there are pendulum swings, the different ones. So, you know, the mother bear is just plodding around on the ice, right? But if that particular moment happens, she'll kill. So I guess what I'm trying to get at, Mary.
Well, this is going back to something before Cynthia's question, but I know there's a kind of cliche that we know about a lot of artists and writers and people have big pendulum swings. But what I've noticed in people more like myself, who with or without the diagnosis that happens for that, is they had those things you mentioned, the performance life force. They had a need for admiration and applause, a self-centeredness. I forget the first one you said. I'm including myself in this when I was younger. And
risk-taking.
Risk-taking. And if you haven't got you know, an artistic or sporting or political channel to try and hone it down like my husband did, then it's just everywhere, because you only have those risk-taking and the other things I've forgotten because I'm excited. You just have that self-centeredness, that's right, and the need for applause. You just have that and you're not making a contribution. And I've met so many people like that. To me, I just really associate that technical diagnosis with performance life force extreme pendulum swings.
Yeah, and then again, they're tools, okay?
Yeah.
Because I was so scared on Tuesday night that I thought, okay. So I started, which I love doing, I started reading one of my books on Michelangelo again. So for a couple of days, I just got into Michelangelo. And, you know, it's the simple tools, it fits. And it really fits, you know, he had this, you know, he had a mean father who was total hostility. And what in another place we call low strata hostility, that's getting very technical. That's someone who, I'm sorry, I'm using David's words, aren't I? Material life force, and where it's just sort of, you know, every penny has to be counted. There can't be any expansion. And that was Michelangelo's father. And he had enough material life force that he would make the money and send it to his father, because his father was always nagging him. And his father hardly gave him any recognition, except, why did you do that and not get paid for it? Okay. So in a way, you know, had that sort of massive performance life force in atoms. Not much need for carrying life force, a little bit. And of course, this is just using him to demonstrate the tools, not explaining him by the tools, you know. His genius was mysterious like everybody else's, of that capability. Because there was nothing in his background at all about art or culture at all. One of the few Florentine families who didn't have that. Most of them did. His father wanted to buy farms, not works of art. Were totally opposed to him becoming an artist. So it's a little long, but if you look at that, I wouldn't want to come up with any sort of, it's a tool, it's not a theory. I wouldn't want to come up with anything like, well, he had these huge pendulum swings. I don't think he did. He did something different with it. So, just the same as, you know, no drama Obama. So I think it's the tools and how the tools can help understanding in this situation is not saying, oh, he's this type, therefore that will happen. Elizabeth, do you want to come in at all?
Oh, I was just thinking that this sort of lack of artistic background with his family, that's similar to Shakespeare, isn't it? In fact, you know, there are whole arguments that say Shakespeare couldn't have written Shakespeare. And of course, I mean, frankly, he did.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think maybe there's something similar to, but that was just the thought that popped up.
I think you're onto something there, because I'd use the tools in both those situations to say, okay, you know, I'm not going to be a glove maker. You know, I'm not going to, you know, just be concerned about managing the family farm. And then some sort of big hurt, okay? Some sort of really, really big emptiness. I think it's like that, because using what Mary was saying earlier, perseverance strata, I mean, they both had their knocks early on. You know, well, they're given big, good. And then where does talent come in, okay? Which is sort of another question. But I think there's something, you're right. I think almost a tool of contribution from hurt, I think is useful because the motivation came from somewhere. And I think we know a lot more about Michelangelo than we know about Shakespeare. But when the sort of motivation and ambition came in, I mean, it was huge. Just the same as great religious leaders have, you know, explosion of huge ambition. I say that with reverence to great religious leaders. You know, I'm not a religious person, and I wouldn't want to again reduce them to our concepts. But I think at least you can say, yeah, these people who come along, all of a sudden they had this really big ambition. And I think the tool of contribution from hurt is useful. It's very useful and interestingly more sort of open in politics than in our field. Our field tends to be surprisingly private and protected, and yet it's about people. So that's where my critic comes in. But putting that aside, politics use their own contribution from hurt and then being transparent about it to huge benefit to them, to their career, to their success. Do you want to come in at all, Nikki?
Hiya. Not really about all the complicated things that you've just been saying just now. I just had a thought earlier when you were talking about sport and highs, and how they've got to control. You were talking about, come down and hit the next ball, not from a high or a low. Anyway, Oscar Pistorius jumped into my head, of course, after I can't remember the details now of the crazy amount of success he suddenly had in those Paralympics, And
I missed the name, Nikki, sorry.
Oscar Pistorius a few years ago.
Oh, yes, the South African. Yeah.
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 And then, wow. He was so high. So, absolute hero, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Worldwide hero. And then, and it turned out afterwards, so he was always a bit paranoid about, somebody coming in and shooting up his house or whatever, but completely flipped. And he'd only been with this girl 2 months. Anyway, just the extremes of, that's an extreme from, it's a bigger, I'm just trying to say it's a bigger version of the high. And then look at the bigger version of the effect of that. What'll come down? Rest of his life paying for that one.
Yeah.
Not just losing the next game. You know what I mean? That's his life.
Yeah.
And hers, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my thought.
Can you say anything about, because you don't use the tools directly the way I do. I'm talking about your practice. But they're in the background.
Yeah.
What is it like? We've never talked about that, but
no.
is it just the fact that you've absorbed them? And do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Because I know you can get bored with me when I go on and on about the tools.
I think it is that it's absorbed, and I do occasionally, I'll teach a bit in a very simple, short, simple way. And the thing that I'm aware of is that any client of mine who has any kind of propensity or talent in the therapeutic way, over time, I'm training them to be a therapist of themselves.
Okay.
And I'm not quite sure how I do that. I think it's a lot of transparency and I don't know. I've noticed it about myself. I notice that. Sometimes over the years, I'll have a client who then wants to start saying, "Oh, they're a bit interested in training a therapist or some kind of caring work like that," and that's when I really notice, and I think, "Oh yeah, any place you go and they try to train you, you're already going to be better than is required by the course, And then that's when I realize, oh, I've trained you to be a Pellin therapist. There's a bit of a handicap going on to certain other therapy courses that people might want to do, because then I have to just quickly go, whoops, don't be transparent.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know quite how. I'm sure there's something about transparency in it. How I use I use the tool. I think I I think I sort of talk about myself in a way, using myself as a sort sample or something, and applying the tools in some way like that. I had a client once who'd stopped coming for a bit, and then she came back, and she said, "Oh, I've really missed your," what the heck's that word? Metaphors. "Oh, I've really missed your metaphors. I did a metaphor and said, I've really missed your metaphors." And I hadn't thought about that. That was when I realized I use a lot of metaphors. But to me, it's just me describing what I mean from one direction, and then describing it from another, and then describing it from another, just to find something that hits the mark, you know, that works for the person. So I don't know if somewhere in the metaphors, it's maybe that's it, in the metaphor. The tools are inbuilt in the metaphors, I think. Maybe that's it. Don't know.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that, I know Elizabeth was wanting to say something just when this started, but I just wanted to add to what Nikki said, is that I usually do teach the tools directly, but with clients that were a bit fragile, I noticed that I did something that sounds a bit like what Nikki did, that I would teach them through, like by example, with transparency, things from my own life that illustrated the tool that was on my mind. Yeah, just anyway, that's it.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, do you want to say what your thing was?
Sure. I didn't want to interrupt the conversation that was happening now, but since I'm asked, so I'm wondering what tools to apply in this situation, which is that I'm doing a lot better than I was. I went to the osteopath. She twisted my limbs back into place, and now I have energy, and there's a limit to how bad my pain gets, so that's great. Before this bad spell, I had a passion project that I invested, time and resources in, and I still want to do it, but I'm feeling hesitant to touch it, to open the box and handle it again. And I don't know why, and I don't know why I'm not as on fire about it as I was, even though it's still just as good. And I'm wondering kind of how to get into it again and how to feel some of that fire again.
Yeah, I think, and it's sort of interesting, and a bit of history in a moment, but the triangle in accepted and rejected efforts can be really useful there, okay? But if we, and you might remember, this is a part of David Pellin's work in some way I haven't developed as much as other parts. And yet, as I look at it now, right now, is the part I need almost more than anything else. I mean, when I first got into the Pellin stuff, the pendulum was sort of really big, and purpose and the life forces. I still can be a sort of shy little caring life force guy. But I think in terms of what you're talking about, I think the triangle is a really useful tool because it combines looking after ourselves, which is, can I enjoy what I'm doing today? And can I look after myself enough so I can keep enjoying it? And can I sort of quit while I'm ahead, which is all the accepted effort? And, if I just can't get to it, procrastination, bad habits. My side, which is all rejected effort, okay? Okay, that's the sort of baseline of the triangle. But the other two sides are all, and I think this is a bit I took for sort of granted in myself, the other two sides are about assessment and evaluation, okay? You know, is this the, because, you know, what you said about passion is something I'm close to right now, this week. Because just to say it briefly, I'm inspired, and I want to make that statement very simply, you know, I'm inspired by what happened. But the two sides of the triangle are about, okay, what does setting that goal mean to me? Have I looked at it from all sides? Can I use advisors? And yeah, Mary.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you, but directly answering, I'd like a direct answer to Elizabeth's question. So how I see it, Elizabeth, is you were in the accepted effort, and you were in your passion project, and you were inspired, and the life of pain intervened and cut it off. And you didn't know that was going to happen. So you didn't protect the accepted effort, the way we can sometimes say, you know, if you know something's coming the next week, you can say, okay, I'm going to kind of put this to one side because I've got to focus on something else, but let me remember my accepted effort and take it up again when the interruption's over. But you had an unforeseen interruption, and then times passed, you had all that pain as well, which kind of keeps you in a more negative state of mind. Time passes, and then, oh, there's my little box of passion. Oh, I don't feel passionate. And the flow of feelings of accomplishment was cut off by the pain. And so it's like you're in a kind of low-key rejected effort going, oh, you know, how can I get back to this project? Why doesn't it interest me anymore? So I hope that helps with the why, because I'm pretty certain that's why. You know, the real life of pain intervening. And so I would suggest something like thinking about how it felt when you had accepted effort, and kind of just always like holding the idea of what you were doing before and saying, oh, it's such a nice idea. I think I'm coming partly from a place that, you know, that I am holding this book and it took me 5 years, right? I had to do that. What I'm just describing to you, I didn't realize, but kind of going back to it and saying, oh, you know, blowing on the embers that will still be glowing because it's not that long ago, and saying, how can I get a little flame going? You know, what could I do? And then applying the triangle of, or what really small start can I do to get back into it, and letting it be really small. You know, it might be like looking at it, whether it's in your mind or a physical object, and then saying, just say it was writing like it was for me, just saying, okay, I'm just going to find all the quotes about, you know, I'm going to remember all my thoughts to do with that chapter I was going to write that I've been thinking about for 3 years and I've never written a word, right? All that outside quotes, whatever it is, something like that. And then it is amazing once you get, if you set the goal small and say, oh, I still haven't written a word, this is me now, still haven't written a word, but I found that I did that thing I said I was going to do. I've done something on the book every day in August. That was what I set myself. And then the writing came. So, you know, small goals in this step and enjoying the memory of what you felt like when you were inside the project.
Yeah, just to sort of add to that, I believe what is useful, you know, in terms of picking the tool, which tool, question. I think it's useful to sort of visualize them, learn it. The Pelham method, which goes back a long way, is the stuff that's really difficult. And this is when there were long residential programs, okay? or when I had people for a very long time. So, you know, we've got people for short times, or Pell and short-term therapy. It might need to be a little different. But overall, is teaching someone the tool first. And then when the problem comes, which I think is also sort of good parenting in a way, you know, you teach the child the stuff first, and then you can say, you remember when we were talking about, you know, what happens if you don't tell the truth? Just the same as remember when we were talking about the triangle. So teaching the stuff first, and this is where it was, you know, the seminal time was guys in prison, particular population, teaching them the stuff first, applying it to a particular situation later. So it sort of takes out, the aim of that method is to take out the diagnostic bit. Oh, you have that problem, well, I have this tool. No, I will teach you the tool first. It's a particular point of view. And again, I think is almost modeled on what nourishing parenting is. So, you know, building on what Mary said, which I think is really right, almost having the diagram, okay? And one of the simple things about the pendulum, it will swing. One of the simple things about the triangle is you can make them smaller, okay? So instead of me having some big project or purpose, I can have a, you know, okay, I've got that big triangle. I'm not taking anything away from my ambition, blah, blah, blah. But I can have a small triangle. And I think that relates directly to the things Mary was saying. Tomorrow.
Can I just add to that before we move on? So one of the things I hadn't noticed as strongly as this is how much what I said is like, how can I put this? I'm just thinking about feelings of accomplishment and accepted and rejected efforts. Of course, I know there's a connection between those two tools, but I really got like an on fire feeling with it because of Elizabeth's passion about her project. I was like, oh, the feelings of accomplishment is like a really roasting, warm fire, and I can do cooking with it, and I can do all these things with it. And then, oh my God, the pains poured this cold water on it. There's nothing but embers and there's ashes. And is there a little bit of glow in there? You know, it's like, and then bringing the feelings of accomplishment back to life. I mean, I might need to apply that to myself after the work in virtual pen in Italy. In the first 4 or 5 days, I did do the knee exercise, the verboten knee exercise I couldn't bring myself to do. And then I let terribly demanding things about the book coinciding with the election and 12-hour days, I let the exhaustion stop me. And I said to myself, I have to, I didn't say in these words, I have to restart the triangle, but I said to myself, I have to restart the knee exercise the day of the Peter Fleming Forum, or I'm really going to be sunk. It's going to be another 2 years or something. So, yeah, but just that whole, I had a lot of feelings of accomplishment because I did it more than once. I did it like 2 sets most of those days I did it. And it was a wonderful feeling after the terrible big block I had. And, but then life intervened. And I think that life intervened thing is huge when we're trying to achieve goals, because it does. And then it becomes a rejected effort because you've missed your goal of keeping it. I didn't make a do it every day goal, but I still missed my goal of doing it most days. But I have the confidence in me as I'm talking about it. I'm feeling I can do that. I can make sure I do it today. I haven't got as much on my agenda today, or I can do it while I'm watching the play I'm booked up to see later today. So anyway, I digressed myself into something I didn't know I was going to say, but I'm glad to talk myself into taking up with the exercise.
Tamara, do you want to come in?
Sure. Oh, I don't know if it's okay to still be referring to Elizabeth's share, but
Go ahead.
making it about me. Okay, I'll make you about me. I think that something that I've noticed is that the attraction to hurt is there for me, and that if there's an accepted effort that runs into trouble, then I'll register that as a failure or something that hurt. And I think without being conscious of it, I'll even imagine that project is what triggered, a migraine that lasted for a week. And there's negative memory links that I have that are woven everywhere. That there are associations and cause and effect that if I'm not careful, all roads can lead to avoidance. Because if it's not sustained good feeling, then it's dangerous. And so I was thinking that for myself, it's not conscious, but I'll have a felt sense of fear and wanting to get away from the last place that I thought I was doing something, and then something bad happened there. It's just I think it's very primitive. If I don't look at it again, then I'll notice that I've abandoned things that I had a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for. And I won't really be able to explain why unless I look at it. And I notice that I do negative memory links to just, what is just, it's a wave action in life. It's not a failure, so to pick something up again is really important. And I really like the way that you were holding this, Mary, and remembering it in the right way and sort of blowing on the embers and come back, little guy, but and for myself, I'm trying to understand how on earth I got here where I am. And I think that I have the underlying purpose was family for me. And that I applied my identity with my caring life force, I threw in there. But when Mary is talking about having a performance life force without a project or sustaining purpose, that exactly what you're talking about, Mary, is like I think I brought a lot of my performance life force to my family issues. And in a way, I can see how I was like a frustrated artist, applying without, I remember a supervisor telling me once, there's nothing more tragic than a narcissist with no talent.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
in some ways, like whatever that was narcissistic and performance about me needed to get that fucker on tracks and have some creative expression. And without that, I think that there was more, literally, like there was more drama than was attractive or healthy or needed by anybody. So those are my thoughts, my share.
Yeah, again, I think
something.
Yeah, go, Elizabeth.
I think there's something else going on a bit with the situation too. My own personal, which is that once I stopped and looked at what I was doing, this doubt crept in of, how dare I attempt this? How dare I say that this big creative project should be done by me? And I don't know, I'm actually finding Michelangelo and Shakespeare inspiring here, because the answer is what I'm working on is a game, and I'm the person who bears the hurts that make games and play so important to me. So I'm the one who can make that contribution. Not only did Shakespeare write Shakespeare, Shakespeare was the only one who could write Shakespeare. And, he was the son of a glove maker, and he was the only one who could write Shakespeare. And I'm not saying my project isn't like equivalent levels of genius or whatever, but sure, it has to be me because it can only be me.
Well, I think that's where the performance life force, and I guess at times being able to have tears about the performance life force, because that's where I'm someone who cries, rather than I'm someone who's got a professional title and crying's not allowed. So I think it's to have the audacity, because I know people have said to me, people very, very close to me, have said to me, you're comparing yourself to Martin Luther King. That's crazy. No, I want to be inspired by this guy. And I want to be able to say I'm inspired without having to put a whole lot of other words around it. And that's performance life force, okay. Not being apologetic, but just saying it. And then the challenge in performance life force, which Mary picked up in terms of her embers, the challenge in the performance life force is anything in the performance life force has discipline in it, okay, self-discipline, anything. Anything in the material life force, this is just straight teaching. Anything in the performance life force has discipline in it. Anything in material life force has numbers in it. It can always be counted, okay? Yeah, sort of Cynthia will know. The material life force, part of a divorce, and children, well, you will have 2 days a week. That's a number, okay? And I guess we can say, again, with audacity, that the caring life force always has love in it. And I guess going back to Nikki's metaphors, I miss your metaphor. And I would imagine that what that person meant was, I missed your loving metaphors, okay? There would have been that sort of connection there. It wouldn't have just been a clever metaphor, that's in a different realm.
I think
So-
it's important to say that when the performance life force has discipline, it's working. Why it's so destructive when it doesn't have discipline is it ends up with like risk taking, but no discipline.
Yeah, and it can also, myself, which I sort of identify with you, Elizabeth, you know, setting goals that are so big, blah, 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 and not doing the grinding discipline. You know, Serena Williams, you know, 200 backhands, or a politician's stump speech, same speech over and over again. And it doesn't matter how great and privileged an actor is, the actor has to learn her lines. Judi Dench has to learn her lines as much as, you know, a kid out of drama school. There's always that sort of, at best, there's a discipline in performance life force, and picking that tool. Then it's sort of, I guess we pick the tool, and then we sort of understand all the ramifications of that tool. It's not performance life force. It's just not having your dream. It's looking at having your dream from a lot of different angles. It's not giving up your dream, but it's looking at it from more angles than one. And I guess the performance life force also has in it loss, the way we don't have in the caring life force or the material life force. You know, only one person can have the leading role. Only one person can win Wimbledon women's championship. There can't be two. Let's look after them both now.
And only one person can become president.
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, in the caring life force, in a way, we never have to lose. All we have to do is put up with heartbreak. You know, Southern Italians have a saying, how's it go? Up to 2 years, they break you back. And after, this is women speaking, matriarch. For the first 2 years, they break you back. And after that, they break your heart. Okay. There's a similar Irish saying that I can't remember. You know, coming in knowing that, yes, if you enter the area of love, you're going to go through loss. But we don't have to lose, but we do in the same way. That's just the tools, and picking one out and saying, okay, I can grasp this tool. And then I can see where it applies. And going back to Tamar's statement earlier about attraction to hurt, you know, or mine around performance life force. Okay, I want to pick up and use this tool, but that one's a bit sharp for me. You know, I could get it wrong, or I could hurt myself or hurt somebody else. So maybe I'll performance life force for me. So maybe I'll sort of pick up the pendulum as well, because within the pendulum there's some safety. And then if you go in to this is picking up tools. If you go into the pendulum, if that's the tool I'm going to use, because I've got this wild performance life force thing going, you know, or I've got an attraction to hurt, which if yesterday had gone the other way, I would have been in a whole bunch of attraction to hurt, no doubt. And I was a bit Tuesday night. So I went into the calm of the pendulum, which is reading a book about Renaissance art. I'm getting absolutely into it. So, there are, in terms of picking the tool, finishing up in a moment, the pendulum, the calm of the pendulum, feelings of accomplishment, they're the survival. That's almost the survival kit. That's almost, the first aid kit that you've got in the kitchen and you've got in the trunk of your car. And in terms of picking a tool, yeah, I need that. So almost, a cup of, I need a cup of hot chocolate. I don't need 2 whiskeys, okay? Not when I'm, and if I was into the attraction to hurt, say, as again, yesterday went the other way, I'd have to be really careful. And because sometimes when I get into attraction to hurt, yeah, Cynthia.
Well, I have a question because I don't know if it probably has been attraction to hurt too, but I think there's also memory links because I remember because I kind of knew things were going to go okay because I had already done the numbers and I had figured that, I had, CNN's little number thing was really helpful. But anyways, one of
I'm a Steve Kornacki fan. Okay?
I didn't want to listen to anybody talk. I wanted to see what the numbers were.
Exactly.
But anyways, one of the things though, and maybe it's from the Caring Life Force, and I don't know where it's coming from, and maybe the pendulum is what I've been needing because maybe it's attraction hurt and it's memory links, but I did not calm down really until I think it was not last night, the night before, when it looked like Biden was. I mean, he was going to win. It just hadn't been called yet. I mean, it was not in my mind. It was I'm 90% sure he's going to win, but numbers again. But one of the things that helped me calm down immensely is when President-elect now Joe Biden spoke. And it was like with this real caring life force, but I almost felt like, and it's funny because I never had that experience. I mean, my childhood growing up was very chaotic, but I just felt like, mommy and dad are going to take care of this. It's going to be okay. We know there's trouble. We know it's there, but we're going to take care of it. And all of a sudden, a whole lot of anxiety just left. And I'm wondering, I guess my big question is that I don't know if it's just my memory links or something about, the material life force it's like, it's really, really hard for me to let go and ignore the content. I can do it if I feel like there's somebody else taking care of it. But if it doesn't look like there's anybody doing anything and there's chaos, it just becomes very overwhelming to me. And in fact, it was funny because after he talked, Trump's still throwing temper tantrums, I imagine, from what I've seen, but I don't really care anymore. I'm like, I know they're going to take care of his temper tantrum, so I don't need to worry about this anymore. So anyways, I don't know, is that like, when you have all these things going on, is the pendulum like a really good go-to for that? Or I'm
Yeah, I think the pendulums, the way I'd say, because we've got to stop in a moment, and we can continue this Wednesday. I think the pendulum, almost always, the pendulum is just a useful one to grab onto, okay? And again, it's grabbing a tool, having a look at it. But I think within this, I think it is material life force. Material life force is survival, food, clothing, shelter, basic survival stuff. And and on the one hand, that's where, in race riots, people break windows and steal television sets, which doesn't really have anything to do with racial injustice, but that's what they do. Go for the material because their life is threatened. And that's what Cori Bush said. There was another ad about someone talking about their childhood and their second home was the gas station after domestic abuse. Okay. So that's material life force, you know. And I think the way you were speaking, it somehow or other goes back to the memory link of, you know, basic stuff is not secure. And mine sort of went back to literally, Dad will fix it, you know, which, you know, I hadn't realized until sort of you'd spoken how much that was a memory link for me. So it's hard stuff. And then again, in terms of some of these very hard situations, we can go back to the calm of the pendulum. Is it okay for me to say all this? Yeah. Go back to the calm of the pendulum. You know, the calm of the pendulum is a direct relative of true rest, okay? And just sort of almost combining those two things. And then if we bring in feelings of accomplishment, little ones, often domestic ones, not necessarily big ones related to our purpose, but just little ones, because I want to get through this painful time. So in terms of choosing tools, it's pendulum, doubling down, calm of the pendulum. See how that's related to true rest. Because attraction to hurt, when we go that way, it will take us away. One tip off to attraction to hurt is we'll sabotage our own chance of true rest, okay? You can almost sort of, once you get a bit more trained in this, you can almost see it happening. You know, Peter, you could go for a walk in the park, you could go jump in the swimming pool. When did I last do that? So they just sort of tip offs, okay? And I think what we can say is there's a therapeutic learning process. And within that therapeutic learning process, there's a particular awareness. Okay, I have that attraction to hurt. I have those ways of getting true rest. That's sort of choosing the tools. Okay, we've got to stop there. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm in Norfolk in England. Yeah, I just, again, I want to say thank you. Do you want to go next, Mary?
Sure. I'm Mary in Rosarito Beach, and just for anyone who hasn't seen the newsletter, they had 3 signs on the stage when Joe Biden and Kamala were going to speak, and one said the people chose truth, and the one said the people chose decency, and the third one said the people chose empathy. So I put that in the newsletter. And the other thing I just want to say quickly was I got this book on Tuesday, and it really helped, you know, with the disappointment of there not being a blue wave. Holding it in my hands after 5 years really helped me stay in my own life and not spin off into the disappointment too much. Really helped with the attraction to hurt that was tempting. And yeah, that's it. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Tamara?
I'm Tamara in Pasadena, California.
Okay. Nikki?
I'm Nikki in Wimbledon. I just was having some little thoughts there to add about with you, Peter, saying, and others saying, oh, Mummy and Daddy are coming to the rescue, and maybe memory links getting triggered. And maybe that's why I get a certain amount of sort of indifference. I sort of haven't got powerful memory links like that. So I'm like, oh, and also that would give the hopelessness and sort of a bit of, I have to more look after not getting hopeful about things, because then it's like, well, nobody comes to the rescue and just shit happens. So anyway, blah blah. Anyway, always yeah, I guess, and my memory links are more like, oh, a surprising good thing happened. So that's more my reaction to things, I think. Okay, thank you. I'll mute now.
Elizabeth?
Sorry about that. My unmute button kept vanishing. I'm Elizabeth from Eugene, Oregon, and I just want to say thanks to everybody. So.
Cynthia?
Hello, I'm Cynthia. I'm from Kankakee, Illinois. And, you know, I will say I think it was a tool of strength and health first that was really helpful for me is that regardless of what happened with who people voted for, the fact that so many people voted and that the election officials, when all that people were shouting at, I mean, they doubled down and they did their counting, and it just made me see how, because I was scared about it, and I don't think I was the only one, but how resilient our democracy is. People want their right to vote and they want their right to be counted. And to me, that just felt like, okay, everything's not going to fall apart. People are, America's not going to put up with it. So that's, you know.
No, I appreciate, yeah, thank you. And just finishing up, I really appreciate you saying that, but if you take that thing and put purpose in there, okay? And then if you put the triangle in there, all those people made it an accepted effort to stand in the queue. Then the other guys, who I understand were being paid minimal wage, many of them, made it an accepted effort to count the votes. Just sort of using the tools, to come in and use the tools to understand something in a really positive way. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay, thanks guys, and see you Wednesday.
Cynthia, make me the host, please, because we're continuing the meeting.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I think Nikki don't go, remember?
Yes, no. Yeah, I've remembered. Okay. I'm going to hold on to the phone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, you two.